Hi all, and welcome back to the second instalment of the Animal Welfare Centre virtual tour. My name's Dean, one of the senior technicians here at the Animal Welfare Centre at Moulton College. On this second tour we're going to go and have a look at our Exotic Species Centre and our Reptile Centre. So our Exotic Species Centre comes through this door, and I'll talk about the species we house in there and why we house them. So this area is very much set up to replicate small zoo industry. So the type of industry that students will go into if they want to become zookeepers. The species that we house in here are all species that you would find within that type of environment as well. Now, students work in each enclosure and work with each species in here as well. We are hands off with the mammal species, so we don't physically touch the species in here, but students learn how to work with them from a distance. So that doesn't mean they can't do anything with the species here. So students will be doing enrichment and training, they'll be doing enclosure design and maintenance, and all sorts with these guys to make sure that they're well looked after, but also that students have the skills necessary to enter the industry. So the species we've got in this enclosure are our Dwarf Mongoose. There's one just underneath the heat lamp there, if I can zoom up and not on the mesh. These are really good species actually, really active, very similar to the meerkat guys. So students work in a very similar way with them. They get multiple feeds throughout the day. This is normally or mostly insect feeds, so mealworms, crickets, and such like. And students get involved in all of that. So lots of enrichment work gets done with those guys to make sure that they're kept healthy and active throughout the day. The next enclosure that we come onto is our green iguana enclosure. Oh, look at this, both looking at us as well. So the green iguanas here came to the centre about 7 years ago now. They were rehomes, so they came from a reptile rescue. Unfortunately, with these larger lizards that are still sold in the pet trade, a lot of people get them when they're small hatchlings and then don't realise quite how big they're going to get. So a lot of them end up in rehome centres. So we took these two in about 7 years ago. They were really grumpy when they first came to us. This is their enclosure. But happily to say that over the 7 years, students handling them and getting them used to being handled, they've calmed down a lot, and they're really nice to have at the centre. The next enclosure that we have is for our prehensile tail skinks. Now these guys are a nocturnal species, so they're not particularly active throughout the day, and I doubt we will see them, I'm afraid. They are a nice species to work with. There was a tail. No, we're not going to see these guys. And then this next enclosure is our tree shrews. So we've got a pair of northern tree shrews in this enclosure. And then the last enclosure in here is our family group of Geldes monkeys. These are really nice species to house here. We're what's called a holding centre for these guys at the Animal Welfare Centre. Now this species is vulnerable in the wild. You can see them just up the top there. If I hang back a bit, they might come back down to the feeding tray. So they're vulnerable in the wild. They're part of a breeding programme held by IAZA. They are here, and we're called a holding facility for them. So they don't breed here, but what we do is they're here to teach the next generation of keepers how to look after these species and how to successfully work with them. But it might be in the future that an individual from this group might be required at another facility to start a breeding group, and then we would be involved in that process. There he is. So they're really nice to work with. We're hands off with them. It's really important to us at the centre that we're not encouraging exotic mammals like this to display any behaviours that aren't natural, and that includes interacting overly with humans. So we like to work with them where we're not, where we're encouraging natural behaviours. So we do lots of enrichment work with them. Students are doing training with them, so they're trained to go onto weight scales so we can have accurate weight records of them. They get lots of enrichment done throughout the day as well. So that might be feeding enrichment, it might be scent enrichment. Got some pair up there doing some mutual grooming. You can see that. These are obviously a firm favourite with students and staff alike. Oh. So next area we're going to head to is our Reptile Center. So that room's just next door. So we'll just head out through this door. This is the outside primate enclosure, which they love using when the sun's shining. And then the outside mongoose enclosure. Just up this ramp is our Reptile Center. Another large room dedicated to reptile species. And we house a lot of species in here. So I'll slowly pan around the room so you can get a sense of what it's like. So again, the bank style systems that we showed you in our rodent center in the last video are used here. So that sort of system that you would find within the pet shop industry. And then larger enclosures for more display type enclosures, and then the more zoo based themed enclosures down here on the floor. So in this enclosure we've got our tortoises, our small tortoise species. So we've got a Hermann's tortoise just under the UV there. And then we've got a marginated tortoise, and we've got spur-thigh tortoises as well. So the logs in the middle are just to keep the boys away from the ladies. In our large enclosures at the back here, we've got our largest snake species. So we've got our boa constrictor, sorry. And then we've got our northern pine snake in this enclosure, which is a bit hidden away. So she's a favourite of students. She's really good to handle. And it's a really nice introduction for students for larger snake species. And then in this corner enclosure that our construction team built for us, we've got our frilled lizards, and there's one nicely on display for you there. So again, a really nice species for students to be working with. It's really important to us here that we encourage students to develop over their time here. So we have students that won't have worked with reptiles at all, and we'll have students that will have a lot of knowledge of reptiles. So it's important that there's a blue spiny lizard looking very handsome. It's really important to us that we have species that are really easy for beginners. So things like leopard geckos, bearded dragons, corn snakes. And then we also have species that are slightly more difficult to work with. We don't have anything here that's dangerous. It's a royal python in his hide in there. Our lovely ocellated uromastyx. Corn snakes. And then in this end enclosure over here is our rainbow boa. So students get to do a lot of work in this room, so a lot of handling of the species, and everything can be handled in here. There are certain protocols and ways to do that safely and appropriately for each animal. And our lecturing team go through all of that with students as they're learning. The students also learn how to feed appropriate feeds, how to set up appropriate enclosures to make sure that the humidity and heating levels are right, and also to make sure the UV levels are right in each individual enclosure. The students will learn about how that's maintained and the different equipment that can be used to maintain each enclosure. Okay, so that's the end of the second tour. So we've looked at the more exotic areas of the collection, so the exotic species and the reptiles. And the next tour we will be looking at our outdoor collection. So down there we have our hoof stock and our rabbits and guinea pigs, and some other nice special treats in store for down there. Like I said in the last video, make sure you have a look online and see when the next live feeds are going to be, and live streaming through Facebook, and Ashley will be meeting you to show you some of our animals at the Animal Welfare Centre. Thank you, goodbye.